Vladimir Putin is claiming victory in Mariupol, despite multiple claims to the contrary. In a highly staged televised meeting with his defense minister, Putin claimed that Russia's effort to, quote, liberate Mariupol had been a success, but said he would not order Russian forces to storm the last stronghold. Well, this is what liberation looks like in Mariupol. Russia's defense minister said that the steel plant where the last Ukrainian forces in the area are sheltering is completely blocked off from the rest of the city. 1,000 civilians and 500 wounded Ukrainian soldiers are also trapped there. New satellite images show more than 200 fresh graves in an area outside the city where Mariupol's mayor says Russians have buried as many as 9,000 civilians who were killed there. While control of Mariupol means in dispute in the Donbass, the Luhansk regional governor says 80% of the region is now under Russian control. And Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, was under intense bombardment as Russian forces struck a residential area today. President Biden announced an additional $800 million in military equipment for Ukraine, citing a critical window as Russia ramps up its assault on eastern Ukraine.
To modernize Teddy Roosevelt's famous advice, sometimes we will speak softly and carry a large javelin, because we're sending a lot of those in as well.
The president also challenged Vladimir Putin's claims.
It's questionable whether he does control Mariupol. One thing for sure we know about Mariupol, he should allow humanitarian corridors to let people on that steel mill and other places that are buried under rubble to get out. That's what any head of state would do in such a circumstance.
Meanwhile, in addition to the military aid package today, the Pentagon announced Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will host defense counterparts for Ukraine-focused talks next week at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Joining me now is Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby. And Secretary Kirby, thank you for being here. Let's go back to this question of Mariupol, because it's significant from two standpoints. Obviously, Putin wants to be able to claim that whole sort of reverse letter C, that he controls that eastern part. And he also just wants to declare victory for anything. What is the understanding right now inside the Pentagon of whether or not Putin and Russia controls Mariupol?
We agree with President Biden. It's questionable how much control the Russians have over Mariupol. Clearly, they have been bombarding the city and causing extensive damage, and they have forces, quite a lot of forces, in Mariupol. But our sense today is that it's still contested, that the Ukrainians are still there, they are still offering resistance. So we're not ready to accept Russia's claims that they have Mariupol. Now, clearly, as you pointed out, Joy, they want Mariupol because it gives them that land bridge unhindered, unencumbered from the Donbass region in the east all the way down to Crimea. They also want to use Mariupol and that part of Ukraine as a springboard to go north up into the Donbass region to try to cut off Ukrainian forces that are still there.
And so is the understanding from the Pentagon's point of view that that is where Russia would intend to stop, and that they would not be trying to use that as a pivot point to try to take over more of Ukraine?
We don't know. We honestly don't know. We know that immediately what they want to do is occupy the Donbass region and find, fix, and in some cases finish Ukrainian forces that are there. They want to occupy that Donbass region. It's a part of the country that they've been fighting over literally for the last 8 years. Now, should he accomplish that? What would he do next? We don't know. Would he just call it a day and say that's what I wanted and declare victory? Or would he use it again as territory from which to launch more attacks further west inside Ukraine and even perhaps threaten Kyiv? We just don't know.
Let's talk about what the U.S. is doing. Secretary Austin is headed to Germany for these Ukraine Defense Consultative Group talks. What will those talks entail? What's the plan for that?
There's three things on the agenda. Number one, Secretary Austin wants to hear from allies and partners and military leaders in the region about their assessment of what's going on the battlefield and in Ukraine, get a sense of operations and what's going on. Number two, talk to allies and partners as well as Ukrainians about their defense needs going forward. The president just announced $800 million in additional assistance today, and we're going to keep trying to support them for as much as we can, as long as we can, as fast as we can. And so we want to be able to get a sense of immediate defense needs. But more critically, what the secretary wants to do is talk to these allies and partners about long-range defense needs and defense partnerships in Ukraine when we get on the other end of this war. What does that look like? What's the footprint in Europe need to look like? So he wants to talk a little bit about more strategic objectives as well.
We're going to show what I'm going to put up on the screen what we're sending right now. With the U.S. is sending $800 million in an aid package with howitzers and tactical vehicles and all sorts of individual things. I think the sense that some Americans have is that we are sort of, putting a lot of money and a lot of equipment behind keeping the Ukrainians going, but that there isn't much of an end game in play by the West. There's been lots of support, but not an end game. Putin seems to be unraveling. There is this sense that he is increasingly isolated. He's firing off missiles, launching this Sarmat missile, which apparently is not even ready to deploy, but sort of threatening the world that, hey, I could get worse. I could threaten the rest of the world. How does the West, how does the world tamp down that threat? Because just continuing to keep, as many Ukrainians alive as possible doesn't feel like winning and stopping Putin.
Well, we certainly want the Ukrainians to win. And now they get to determine what victory looks like. We're not telling them how to negotiate or reach the outcomes at the end, but we want them to win. We want Russian forces out of Ukraine. We want Ukrainian sovereignty to be respected by Russia and by everybody else. That's what's really at stake here, and that's why we're helping them defend themselves as best we can. We are also working hard to make sure that NATO's eastern flank is well defended and well coordinated, and that there's no threat to NATO territory by Mr. Putin, and we don't even want him to begin to think like that. Now, you talked about him unraveling. He has not achieved any of the strategic objectives that he has had, or that he set for himself in the early goings of this invasion. And again, we don't know what the end game is in his mind, if the sum total of his objective is just the Donbass region. But he has clearly been set back in what his initial aims were at the outset, and we want to make sure that he's not able to achieve the aims that he's got right now inside the Donbass.
Very quick question as I let you go. When Secretary Austin is in Ramstein, Germany, any thought that he might head to Kyiv, that he might at some point meet with President Zelensky?
We're focused on the trip to Ramstein and to talking to these allies and partners, and that's really what we're focused on right now.
We will thank you very much, Pentagon Secretary John Kirby, who makes the list of travel-banned Americans, along with Vice President Harris and some journalists and others, Ron Klain, other White House members. Consider it a badge of honor, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.